Talk Radio. Listen, phone, talk.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
One of our guests, the element I'm discussing is the fact that there were Amazonian tribes, obviously, if he's mapping out the Amazon, and their practices, notably shrinking heads. And for the Steph and Dom Want to Know section of today, we thought we would try and find out how on earth you shrink a head, particularly if you're in the jungle, because you don't have access to all sorts of chemicals and formaldehyde and all this, that and the other. And we're trying to get hold of this specialist. Can you believe that there is an actual specialist in real shrunken heads? And he goes round evaluating whether the head's a real head or not.
So they really are. They're not just baby heads.
No.
Heads of dead, sadly passed on babies.
No, they're not, because they've got long, long hair, and it's all very, very strange. I've always wondered, because they're beautifully preserved, and I don't know how they do that. So we're trying to get hold of him right now. So if you're out there, what's his name?
Glenn McGinty.
Yeah. Obviously, they're trophies, aren't they? You know, to show how clever you are and how many people you killed, or your enemy is dead, or what have you. But I just find the whole process of actually shrinking them. Why do they even bother to shrink them? Is it because they didn't have much storage room?
Well, if we can get hold of Glenn McGinty, we're going to find out they may not actually really exist.
I'm telling you the full story because we haven't got him on the line. If we don't get him back, we will certainly get him back tomorrow or next week. In the meantime, what do you want to talk about?
No, I've just got buzzing in my ear.
What's that?
We've got a clip from Chris Moyles from Radio X, who apparently he's been commenting on us.
Oh, hang on. We're not allowed to do this. Here we go. Radio reversal.
Oh.
Radio reversal.
Oh dear.
Oh, no.
What have we done wrong?
Nothing wrong. You did everything right. We've got a guest now.
Oh, we have
So
got
this
our
is
guest.
you did well there, so we were trying to fill some time
We
for
did
listeners.
too well.
We'll work on that.
Thanks.
But you've got Glenn on the line now.
Oh, brilliant.
You
Fantastic.
need to go to, let's say, 57.
57.
57.
There we've got. Okay. Right. Hello, Glenn McGinty.
Hello.
Are you there? Hello, Glenn.
Hi, how are you?
Very well indeed. And you're, Glenn, you're from, you are in Denver, Colorado, as we speak. Is that right?
Well, I'm in the mountains right now, about a few hours outside of Denver. But yeah, Denver is where I'm from. Yeah.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, we're talking live to Colorado in the US of A. Okay. So, Glenn, what can you tell us about Shrunken Heads? We saw them featured briefly in a movie the other day and thought, nah, can't be real, can't be true. What's the story behind Shrunken Heads?
Well, they are real. What happened was in the late 1800s up until the early 1900s, in South America and Ecuador and Peru, a tribal warrior would kill another tribal warrior, and it was a process to where they would cut the person's head off, take the skull out, shrink it, and wear it around their neck. It was a trophy. It was a way of capturing the person's spirit, and this and that. They became popular for tourists that were traveling down there who wanted to bring them back as souvenirs. So after that, what happened was they were started like doctors would take bodies, unclaimed bodies from morgues, cut their heads off, shrink them, and sell them to tourists. So the majority of actual shrunken heads, the ones that are real out there, are what they call tourist or trade shrunken heads. Very few of them are actually the real tribal or ceremonial shrunken heads. But they are real. There are a lot of fakes out there as well. But they are real. It's not a myth. A lot of people think it's a myth, and they think, well, you can't shrink a head. You can't because of the skull, but the skull is always taken out, and that's why it's just the skin that actually shrinks. Yeah.
Okay, so they aren't. So in the movies that we see, you know, Hollywood are putting out these little shrunken heads that sort of look like skulls, but obviously they're not. So a shrunken head is not a shrunken skull. It's,
correct.
It's everything else. So how do you actually? So you cut
Correct.
off the head, you peel back the hair, take out the skull.
You cut off the you cut off the head. They make an incision from the back of the neck up in the back, all the way up to the top of the head. and they take it and they peel everything away, and they pull the skull out. Then they clean it inside. They sew it back up. They normally sew the lips shut, and sometimes they sew the eyes shut as well. And then they would boil it in hot water with herbs and like a concoction. And then they would put hot sand or pebbles in it, and they would keep rolling it around, and eventually it would take the hydration out of it, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller, and it's almost like beef jerky, believe it or not.
Oh my
some kind of
God.
Right.
Hi, Glenn. I'm Steph. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to say hello yet.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Right. So interestingly, they must then the actual facial structure, and what have you, must sort of cave in.
Well, that's while they're doing the process of shrinking it, they often form it with their hands, their fingers, to keep the form somewhat. But often, sometimes the forehead is not correct, or the cheeks or the lips. They're not exactly formed. Some of them are. So some of them are. But yeah, it's. And then after they're done and they're dry, they were normally stuffed with like newspaper or something to keep the form. So we've often found them with newspaper from the 30s or 40s actually stuffed in them inside them.
God, they still did it then. Do they do it now?
No. It's against the law to do it now. It was outlawed in the mid 1940s. So all the ones you see are generally from the mid 40s on back. Yeah.
How many of them have you actually examined and have declared to be real?
At least 100. Last week counted, it was over 100.
How did you even start to get into this? I mean, I just found the whole thing rather gruesome.
Yeah, it is. I started about 22, 23 years ago. I was dealing in Egyptian antiquities, and I had done a deal with one of the experts who's since passed away in Canada, and we did a deal, and we ended up actually trading an Egyptian artifact, and he gave me a shrunken head,
Wow.
and then a couple of weeks later I bought another one, and that's how the whole thing started. But yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, Glenn, thank you very much. We'll be right back after Shauna and the news.
Talk Radio. Listen, phone, talk.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.
We were just talking with Glenn McGinty from all the way Denver, Colorado, all about shrunken heads. And if you have a look on his website, realshrunkenheads.com, you'll see that Jasmine, who's obviously been there for quite a long time, looks remarkably like Posh Spice, which is nice.
She'll
anyway.
be delighted to know that she looks that thin.
Yes, and tiny and weightless and small and unfortunately very, very dead.
Okay.
But obviously Posh Spice is not, which is good news.
Talk Radio. Listen, phone, talk.
Talk Radio.
We'll get you talking.